Welcome to the Noodle Podcast. We are Kate and Max, and we love noodling on what we've learned by accident. This podcast is a space where we share how we get the best out of ourselves and the people we've worked with. In today's episode, we talk about some pretty deep and dark stuff, like bereavement and how that shapes decisions, acting out in a way you're less than proud of, and owning your story, even if it doesn't have a happy ending yet. Hello.
Hello.
What are we talking about today? I think it might get a little bit deep and dark because we are going to talk about learning from ugly things.
Tough times. Messy things. Yes.
Dark stuff.
Where do we start?
Well, what did you... Why don't we go back like we usually do? What did you learn early on from something difficult or uncomfortable?
So I think I learnt that when I was having a tough time quite early on, I wasn't always handling it particularly brilliantly. And I can remember working at one organisation where I found myself picking fights with people, just being a bit
Actual
awkward.
fights? Oh.
No, not actual fights. But I was definitely sort of fishing for an opportunity to have a disagreement. I had fallen out of love with the firm that I was working for. I wasn't totally happy with the decisions they were making. And I was quite a young manager. And I was struggling to take responsibility for those decisions, because that's always a challenge, isn't it? Sometimes you have to make decisions on behalf of an organisation that are for the greater good, but they're not always easy to communicate. And I remember disagreeing, and I was just looking at every opportunity to pick a fight and just be awkward and disagreeable, and took me a long time to realise that it was time for me to move on, because not everybody felt the same as I did. So
that's probably hard to recognise and to admit to yourself and to share, to be honest, as well. What was your learning from that?
Well, I guess recognising that I was being painful was the first learning, because I didn't really know until I'd left, and I looked back and thought, okay, you could have handled that differently, and you could have recognised that not everybody around you was agreeing with what you were thinking was right or important. I mean, it's that perceptual positions thing we've talked about before, is you think, must be right if I'm feeling it. It's got to be right. My version of the truth and all that sort of thing. So that thing about perspectives, and also just recognising that just because it's not right for me doesn't mean it's not right for other people.
Yeah, it is. It takes some experience and some bravery, I think, to recognise that you are in the thick of it, and that's only one place to be. What would happen if you got off the dance floor and onto the balcony and had a look at yourself down below? What do you see? What's happening? What impact are you having on people around you? And when you're finding things difficult or painful, yeah, I think you're right. It's not necessarily the same for other people. It just feels very sharp to you, doesn't it? Yeah, so what is that model that you share in workshops and webinars with people to help them understand what's going on when they're not necessarily feeling at their best in their job, that difficult, painful place? Where does that come from?
Well, one of my favourites, I mean, there's several, but my favourite one is the snappily named Yerke-Dodman curve. Yes, Yerke-Dodman curve. But it's the one where you really understand that in order for you to be inspired and excited, you need an amount of stress to get you up and out of bed to want to get involved and engaged at work. But when things get super stressful, your performance starts to rise and you really start to sort of fly, if you like. You're able to really be great. But then there comes a tipping point, and that tipping point is when you start to shift towards burnout. And part of that burnout means you can become quite painful, and it could be because you're doing stuff you don't enjoy, or because you've got too much on your plate. I mean, there's multiple reasons why you could be at that tipping point on that curve. And I guess in that situation, I really was unhappy and not able to see or find a way out. But different reasons for being at the top or tipping over that curve and coming down the other side.
Yeah, and it's knowing where are the boundaries and what's difficult and what's just too much. What should you just keep on pushing through, and when should you say no, that's enough? And I've worked with enough people who have been in tears because they're working so hard and they don't seem to be getting anywhere. And you get to a point where you say, "This, you're talking a lot to your manager, but is anything changing?"
I think when you talk about tears, another beautiful moment for me was sitting at your house in tears, working on a client situation where I was stuck. I was absolutely properly stuck. And I think I was definitely on the downside of that curve and needed you to sort of dig me out. Do you remember?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I do. And it was so out of character for you. It obviously takes a lot to get you to that point where this is just not okay and you can't deal with it on your own. But yeah, I did have to sit you down and go, what can we simplify? What's the one thing that you need to do here? You're spinning, pull back. And yeah, so you focused on the one thing. It was write the report that was asked for, even though you could see hundreds of other things that needed fixing. It wasn't going to be you that had to fix those things. And it was just recognizing just because you can do it doesn't mean you have to do it. I was going to say, I've seen quite a few interesting messages of that ilk on LinkedIn recently of people who are leaving a job and they don't necessarily know what they're going to do next, but they are carefully and well wording their message, which says, I'm really looking forward to what's next. I don't know what that's going to be. So they're sort of putting it out there, probably saying, I'm here, if you want to tap me up. But also they are very generously and bravely and graciously owning their story.
I do remember working with a coaching client actually about that, honouring what you've just been through as well. So recognising, because quite often when you leave a situation, that's not fair to say quite often. Sometimes when you leave a situation, you leave because it's a bit shit. It's a bit ugly, really. And you're not necessarily in a place to honour the experience that you've had. But that's the important piece of work, which is to honour everything that has happened to you up to the moment that you leave, rather than just seeing that moment as the lens to look at it through. Particularly if you've been somewhere for several years, it's really good to sort of think, actually, what I've learned here, the people I've got to know, the networks I've built, the experiences that I've been through is really important.
Yeah, I know a couple of people who have left the same organisation actually after many, many years. And it took a lot of doing for them to do that. And actually, the end story probably wasn't that pleasant for them for one reason or another. But they have come to terms with that and then been able to do that, get off the dance floor and onto the balcony. What's a different way to look at this? Okay, let's look at the 19 years that gave me something really great. That last year stretched out a bit too long. In fact, that was my story. So I stayed somewhere where the last year was definitely too long, but it served a purpose. So I'd gone through a hideous bereavement. Even though I wasn't happy in that job, at that point I knew I wanted to leave, but needing to deal with all the stuff that came after the loss of my son meant I need to keep something stable. I'm not ready just to throw everything up in the air because this awful thing has happened in my life. So having a job that wasn't the space I wanted to be in, but I knew it. I could do it. I could kind of hamster wheel my way through that. I will always be grateful that I was able to do that, and that I was given the chance to do it as well. That job was there. I didn't do my best work in that last year, but I wasn't being expected to either. So that was really, really good. I can still look back and go, yeah, the work wasn't great, but it was good for me at that point. But you've known someone who made all the changes after a bereavement, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And some people feel that that's the right time. I mean, for you, I totally understand, that what that did for you in creating the stability. And that's so important for anybody going through a significant change in their life, is to have something stable, some sort of certainty. But yeah, somebody I know also following a bereavement of their partner, gave up their career, gave up the place they lived in. They had a holiday, and they got rid of everything to start afresh. So it really does depend on each person what's going to work for them. And I guess I would always advocate just something that gives you a feeling, like you say, a feeling of rhythm, routine, something that allows you to build that energy back up, to build that confidence back up. Because whenever we're going through our careers, there's always tough times. And those tough times could be because of the work, or they could be because of something outside work. But all of that to say, you might not be particularly pretty through that. I know that I've had times, like I say, that I've not been the most beautiful manager at work or the most beautiful employee. But I hope that other people around me have recognised that maybe I was going through some tough times and given me some space.
That's exactly it. I think for the people who listen to this podcast, if you are working with people who behave in a way that you find kind of not great, it may be something else is going on for them outside. And so to have that generosity of spirit and understanding, it's kind of a beautiful circle in a way, isn't it? It invites other people to come to your level of, do you know what, it's going to be okay. Things aren't going to stay this crap forever.
And I think you can be curious without having to know all the detail, as in curious about what's going on for someone and how it might be affecting their behaviour without having to get them to confess all. Because not everybody wants to bring all of their woes to work or share all of their challenges. But you can have a conversation with people just to say, you're not your usual self. Is there anything else that you need or want from me to help you today? Because I'm noticing that you're not as chipper as you are normally, or don't seem to be as organised. And you can call it out in a gentle way without expecting that they've got to confess and sort it out and then just, zips back to super performer behaviour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're not necessarily going to be the person who's going to fix that stuff. It's just making sure there is space for them to know, it won't last. They can bring themselves back from the brink or make some choices and some decisions. And if they're coming to you with those problems, you need to do the same thing. Reach out, use whatever resources are available, whatever help you can take, so that you're not sort of sponging up their difficult situation. We know a lot of people who are great people, but in turn, they can sometimes get burnt out because they feel the weight of everything that's coming to them. So it's very important they, in turn, have somewhere they can take that to and share. So, what's our main learning point from today then? It did go a little bit deep, didn't it?
It did go a little bit deep and a bit dark. That was quick in that time to go that deep. I think for me, it always sounds a little bit cheesy that there's learning in everything, right? But even the ugly stuff has got something for us to take a learning from, whether it's to do something more, do something less, or just do something different. But it's always helpful to just do a little bit of looking in the rear view mirror and just reflecting on what's just gone on and who do I want to be from here. Your narrative thing, I love the storytelling. I know we've talked about it before, but it's so important, I think.
And the other imagery, I think, to hold when you are in the thick of it and it's feeling very deep and dark is it won't last, and you will end up like that beautiful pottery that the Japanese fix with gold paste, kintsugi. And there is beauty in ugliness, and you will come out of this stronger. Yeah, I think that's the learning experience today.
Nice image to end on. So I guess we'll see you next time, or you'll hear us next time, but hopefully we'll be having a little bit more fun.
Definitely. Let's make it upbeat and peppy next time.
Okay, let's do that.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much for joining us on our lockdown episode today. We'd love to know what you think and any experiences you have that you're happy to share. Please join us at noodle.space. Don't forget to subscribe, share and leave us a review. And you can now follow us on Instagram at noodle_space. We'll see you next time.